Most of us spend our lives trying to stay in the light. We search for clarity, for certainty, for some sign that tells us where we are going. And when darkness arrives, our first instinct is often to believe that something has gone wrong. But an eclipse tells a different story, because sometimes the light has not disappeared at all. Something has simply moved in front of it. For a few extraordinary minutes, the familiar world changes. The sky darkens in the middle of the day. Colors become quieter. Shadows sharpen. The temperature falls. And people who might normally walk past one another without looking up suddenly stop. Together, watching the same sky. There is something almost impossible about the sight. The moon, so much smaller than the sun, moves into exactly the right position, from exactly the right distance. And for a brief moment, something powerful enough to illuminate an entire world seems to disappear behind something silent, something dark, something small. But the sun has not gone anywhere. That may be the most beautiful part. It is still burning, still giving light, still exactly where it was before. We simply cannot see all of it. Perhaps there are moments in our own lives that feel like eclipses, times when something moves between us and the life we thought we understood. A disappointment, an ending, a question without an answer, a future that suddenly looks different from the one we imagined. And because we can no longer see the light clearly, we begin to wonder whether it is still there. We mistake hidden for gone, temporary for permanent, shadow for absence. But the sky knows better. The moon continues moving. It does not stop in front of the sun. It cannot. The darkness has a beginning, and because it has a beginning, it also has an end. There is something comforting in that. Not because every difficult moment passes quickly. Some shadows stay with us longer than we would choose. Some seasons change us before they leave. But even then, movement is happening, quietly, imperceptibly. The sky is never as still as it appears. Neither are we. During an eclipse, there is a moment when almost everything becomes dark, yet a thin ring of fire remains around the edge. The sun refuses to disappear completely. Even when almost entirely covered, its presence can still be seen. Just enough. A narrow border of light around something that seems completely black. Perhaps hope often looks more like that than we expect. Not a bright morning. Not an immediate answer. Not everything suddenly becoming easy again. Sometimes hope is only an edge of light, a reason to continue, a small reminder that what we cannot see has not necessarily been lost. And then something extraordinary happens. At the edge of the moon, the first direct light begins to return. One small point, almost nothing compared with the darkness surrounding it. Yet the moment it appears, everything changes. The darkness has not completely left. The moon is still covering almost all of the sun. But one point of light is enough to tell the entire story. The eclipse is already ending. Maybe that is why we do not always need as much certainty as we think. Perhaps we do not need the entire sky to become bright before we begin believing in morning again. Sometimes one small opening is enough. One conversation, one unexpected moment of peace, one thought that feels lighter than yesterday, one reason to try again. The light does not need to return all at once. It only needs somewhere to enter. Slowly the moon continues across the face of the sun. More light returns. The world begins becoming familiar again. Colors reappear. Warmth returns to the air. Shadows soften. And eventually the same sun that seemed to vanish is shining exactly as it did before. Nothing had happened to the light, only our view of it had changed. Perhaps there are things in our lives like that too. Peace, meaning, hope, even ourselves. There may be moments when they feel completely absent, but absence and invisibility are not always the same thing. Sometimes something remains quietly behind the darkness, waiting for movement to reveal it again. And perhaps that is what an eclipse leaves us with. Not the promise that darkness will never come. It will. The moon will cross the sun. Clouds will cover the sky. Life will place things between us and the light we thought we could always see. But darkness does not have to mean the light has gone. Sometimes the light is still there, exactly where it has always been, waiting behind the shadow. For a moment, the darkness feels complete. The sun is still there. We know that. And yet knowing something and being able to see it are not always the same thing. Perhaps that is why an eclipse feels so strange. The mind understands what is happening. The body experiences something else. Day becomes almost night. Warmth begins to fade. The familiar world suddenly feels unfamiliar. And instinctively, we look upward. Maybe we do the same thing in life. When something changes unexpectedly, we search for an explanation. We want to understand why this happened, why now, why us. As though understanding the shadow might make it disappear more quickly. But the eclipse offers no explanation. The moon simply continues moving. The sun continues burning, and the earth waits beneath them. There is nothing to solve, only something to witness. That can be difficult for us. We have become very good at treating every uncomfortable feeling like a problem. Sadness must be fixed. Uncertainty must be answered. Loneliness must be escaped. Silence must be filled. We rarely allow a difficult moment to simply be a difficult moment. We immediately ask what it means, where it is going, how long it will last. But beneath an eclipsed sun, there is no way to hurry the sky. No amount of worrying moves the moon faster. No amount of wishing brings the light back sooner. For those few minutes, the only thing anyone can do is remain, watch, wait, and trust the movement we cannot control. Perhaps there is something worth remembering in that. Not everything that feels dark requires immediate action. Some things require patience. Some questions need time before they become answers. Some feelings need to be felt before they become lighter. Some seasons cannot be rushed without missing what they came to show us. The strange darkness settles across the landscape. Animals respond to it. Birds grow quieter. The air changes. For a moment, an entire world adjusts itself to something temporary. Nothing knows exactly what comes next, yet nothing panics. Nature simply responds to the moment it has been given. And then, almost unnoticed, the shadow begins moving on. At first, the difference is small, so small that someone looking away might miss it. A little more light, a little more warmth, a thin brightness returning to the world. This is often how difficult seasons end. Not dramatically, not with a clear announcement that says, "It is over now." Instead, something becomes slightly easier. You wake one morning, and the first thought is no longer the thought that has followed you for months. You hear a song and realize it does not hurt in quite the same way. You laugh without forcing it. You make plans without noticing that. For the first time in a long time, you are thinking about the future again. The shadow is still there, but it has moved. Maybe healing is rarely the sudden return of the entire sun. Maybe it begins with noticing that the darkness no longer covers quite as much as it did yesterday. There is a temptation to dismiss small changes. We want transformation to be obvious. We want the moment when everything becomes different. But the sky does not work that way. The moon moves slowly. Light returns gradually. And still, every fraction matters. A little light changes the landscape. A little hope changes a day. A little courage changes the next decision. A little peace can change the way we carry something we cannot yet change. Perhaps small does not mean insignificant. Perhaps small is simply how most important things begin. The bright edge of the sun grows wider now. The darkness starts losing its hold. What seemed absolute only moments ago is already becoming temporary. And that may be one of the quietest lessons hidden inside an eclipse. Darkness can feel complete without being permanent. When we are inside something difficult, we rarely experience it as a passing moment. It feels like the whole sky, the whole future, the whole story. But a shadow can cover everything we see and still be only a shadow. There is always more beyond the edge of it. More sky, more light, more life than this particular moment allows us to see. Slowly the world begins returning. But perhaps returning is not quite the right word, because the world never left. The sun never left. The light never stopped existing. Only the arrangement changed. Moon, sun, earth. Three ordinary things moving through space. And for one extraordinary moment, their paths aligned. Then they continued. Maybe our lives are filled with alignments like that. Moments when fear crosses hope, when loss crosses love, when uncertainty crosses everything we thought we knew. For a while, one thing obscures another, but nothing stays perfectly aligned forever. Everything moves. Even grief moves. Even fear moves. The light is returning now, slowly enough that the change is almost impossible to see from one second to the next. But compare this moment to a few minutes ago, and everything is different. The world is brighter. The air feels warmer. Colors begin returning to the landscape. And the darkness that once seemed to fill the entire sky has already started becoming a memory. There is something strange about how quickly we adjust. When the shadow arrived, it felt extraordinary, almost impossible. But as the light returns, the familiar world quietly becomes ordinary again. Perhaps we do this with more than eclipses. We survive something we once believed we could never carry. We spend months wondering whether life will ever feel normal again. Then one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, normal has returned. Not the same normal, something quieter, something changed, but life has begun moving again. We make coffee, we answer messages, we laugh at something small. We stand in a grocery store deciding what to eat for dinner. And somewhere between all those ordinary moments, something that once occupied every thought has become only one part of a much larger life. Maybe that is one of the gentlest ways time helps us. It does not always remove what happened. It gives everything else room to grow around it. The eclipse continues moving toward its end. More of the sun becomes visible. The moon that seemed powerful enough to erase daylight now looks different. Nothing about the moon itself has changed, only its position. That matters because sometimes the things that frighten us are not as permanent as they appear from where we happen to be standing. Perspective can make something seem enormous. A problem can fill an entire week. A mistake can fill an entire night. A fear can fill an entire future until something shifts. A conversation, a little distance, a new piece of information, time, and suddenly the thing that once covered everything becomes smaller, not meaningless, just no longer the whole sky. Perhaps we should be careful about making permanent conclusions from temporary positions. There are nights when the future looks impossible, mornings when everything feels uncertain, moments when we believe we understand exactly how the rest of our story will unfold. But we are looking from one place, at one moment, under one particular sky, and everything is still moving. The moon moves, the earth moves, the sun moves through a universe larger than we can comfortably imagine. Nothing is truly standing still. Yet from where we are, it often looks that way. Maybe that is why patience can be so difficult. Movement is not always visible while it is happening. A seed beneath the ground looks like nothing. A wound healing beneath the skin looks unchanged. A person learning to trust again may appear exactly as they did yesterday. But invisible does not mean inactive. Some of the most important changes happen where no one can see them. The eclipse makes this impossible to ignore. Even at the darkest moment, the moon was already moving away. Before the first point of sunlight returned, the return had already begun. We simply could not see it yet. Think about that for a moment. The light can be on its way back before we have any evidence that it is coming. Perhaps there have been moments in your own life like that. Moments when you thought nothing was changing, when you felt stuck, when every day seemed like a repetition of the one before it. And yet somewhere beneath what you could see, something had already begun shifting. You were becoming tired of carrying something. You were learning to say no. You were slowly accepting an ending. You were beginning to imagine another possibility. The change existed before you had words for it. Just as daylight begins returning, before our eyes fully recognize it, the sun grows brighter. Soon it becomes difficult to remember exactly how strange the darkness felt. That, too, is worth noticing. We often underestimate our ability to move through things. Before something happens, we imagine it endlessly. How will I handle it? What if I cannot? What if everything changes? Then life changes. And somehow, we change with it. Not perfectly, not without fear, but enough. We discover strength only because something asks us to use it. Maybe courage has never been something we possess in advance. Maybe it appears when the shadow arrives. The world is almost fully illuminated again. People begin lowering their eyes from the sky. Some return to their cars. Some check the photographs they tried to capture. Some simply stand for another moment, reluctant to let something so rare become ordinary again. But no photograph can quite contain what happened, because an eclipse is not only something you see, it changes the feeling of the world around you, the temperature, the silence, the light. The eclipse is almost over now. The moon continues moving. More of the sun becomes visible with every passing moment. The world grows brighter, warmer, familiar again. And yet, after watching the light disappear, familiar light somehow feels different. Perhaps that is one of the strange things about temporarily losing sight of something. When it returns, we notice what was always there: warmth on our skin, color in the sky, shadows beneath our feet. Things that existed every day without asking to be appreciated. Nothing about the sun changed during the eclipse. It did not become weaker. It did not stop burning. It did not need to fight its way back. The only thing that changed was what stood between us and the light. Maybe there are moments in life when we forget this. We feel distant from ourselves, from peace, from hope, from the person we thought we were becoming. And because we cannot feel those things anymore, we assume they have disappeared. But perhaps they are sometimes only hidden, covered for a while by something passing through. Fear can do that. Grief can do that. Uncertainty can do that. For a while, the shadow becomes all we can see. And when something fills our entire view, it is easy to believe it fills the entire world. But it doesn't. One difficult day is not an entire life. One ending is not every future beginning. One mistake is not everything we are. One shadow is not the whole sky. The eclipse reminds us of perspective. From where we stand, the moon appears large enough to cover the sun, yet the sun is unimaginably larger. The darkness feels complete because of our position. Move somewhere else, and the story looks entirely different. Perhaps perspective cannot remove what we are going through, but it can remind us that what we are going through is not everything. The sunlight continues returning. People who gathered to watch begin lowering their eyes from the sky. Soon they will return to their cars, their homes, their ordinary afternoons. The extraordinary moment becomes memory almost immediately. There is something beautiful about that too. Not every meaningful experience needs to change our entire lives. Sometimes it simply changes the way we notice what was already there. Tomorrow morning may look exactly like yesterday morning. The same sun, the same streets, the same responsibilities waiting. But perhaps the light will feel slightly less ordinary. Perhaps we will remember what it looked like when only a thin edge remained. Perhaps we will remember the strange silence when the world became dark, and maybe for a little while, we will pay closer attention to warmth through a window, to an open sky, to the quiet things supporting our lives every day without asking to be noticed. Light is one of them. Breath is another. Time, the presence of someone we love, the possibility of beginning again after a difficult day. These things rarely arrive with ceremony. They simply remain until something briefly moves in front of them. The sky is almost completely bright again now. Soon there will be no visible trace of the eclipse. Someone arriving later might never know anything unusual happened, but those who witnessed it will remember the darkness, the stillness, the first point of returning light. Perhaps remembering that return is enough, because there will be other shadows, not eclipses in the sky, but moments in ordinary life when direction becomes difficult to see, days when confidence disappears, seasons when hope feels farther away than it once did. We cannot prevent every shadow, and perhaps we were never meant to. But we can remember that a shadow does not destroy the light behind it. It only changes what we can see for a while. The sun is fully visible again, bright, steady, exactly where it has always been. The eclipse is finished. The world continues. And perhaps there is no grand lesson we need to take from it. Only one quiet reminder. The next time something passes between us and the light, We do not have to pretend that it isn't dark. We do not have to know exactly when it will pass. We only have to remember what the sky showed us. The shadow can feel enormous. The darkness can feel complete. And still, the light can remain behind it, unchanged, waiting to be seen again.